The Kremlin says the U.S. and NATO should have, quote, little ground for optimism as Vladimir Putin peruses that written response to his demands of the West. The U.S. State Department says there's still an opportunity to avoid a legacy of war. We wanted to check back in with Vadim Prystaiko. He is currently Ukraine's ambassador to the United Kingdom, but he also served as his country's ambassador to Canada and head of mission to NATO. Ambassador Prystaiko, great to have you on the show again.
Thank you for having me.
You know, when we spoke last week, you said Canada is one of the few countries that could help Ukraine in many different ways. Yesterday, as you know, we learned that Canada will be expanding its training mission there, but is not going to be sending lethal weapons. What did you make of that?
Thank you. I couldn't say that I knew it. I hoped for this. I listened today to Prime Minister Trudeau's statement. I'm very happy because it is just not as impressive, but also timely and very much needed. 400 people on the ground in Ukraine, training with our people and actually training with them, knowing something from them, learning from something from them as well. Cybersecurity, non-lethal, 340 million in assistance. This is what we need right now. We have our partners working with us, but this help is very much needed right now.
You know, some folks here in Canada, the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress sent out a statement saying it's not enough. There were hints of that from the chargé d'affaires here in Canada for the Ukrainian embassy. Do you think Canada is doing enough when you look at the immediate concerns?
I'm happy that we're receiving what we can have at this moment, and this is for each and every government to decide what is to give and what is to offer. I can tell you from here, for example, we are closing some gaps with the US and UK in anti-tank defense, but we still have much to do in air defense and maritime defense. There is another thing we just ratified today, almost 3 billion Canadian dollars. I mean, it was in pounds, but the size is 3 billion Canadian dollars a credit, which will help our Navy to be rebuilt. 2 ports will be built, ships will be built here in UK and Ukraine, and even some anti-ships missiles, very real lethal weapons. So we can think of something with Canada. It creates job on both sides, it helps Ukraine, and it's getting our nations together.
The way things are progressing, the kind of language that we're hearing from the United States, European leaders, Canada as well, you get the sense that the West is preparing for a potential invasion, a potentially imminent invasion. But then we do hear from Ukraine's leadership, you know, playing that down, telling people there to stay calm. What do you make of the difference in that approach?
I believe that our partners around the globe, especially those ones who possess necessary intelligence, they understand the real situation. At the same time, they understand what our leadership is trying to achieve. We are trying to calm down 40 million nation, at the same time preparing for war. I will give you an interesting thing. Yesterday we had Pope of Rome was praying with all Ukrainians around the globe, with the Catholic Ukrainians, for the peace of Ukraine. So everybody trying to help as much as possible. Everybody's trying to talk to Russians, and everybody's trying to understand how we can collectively avoid this war.
How worried are you at this point that something is going to happen?
We are worrying, especially when I wake up in the morning and read that somebody again predicting that war will start on 6th or 7th of February. This is very worrying. All of us here in London, we have our families back home, and this is not something we can foresee in our nightmares.
Yeah, and others predicting that it may happen after the Olympics in Beijing. So there are lots of questions and concerns. There are diplomatic efforts still underway, as you know well. 2 parallel diplomatic pathways, I guess we could look at it to try and deter Russia. One is led by NATO and the United States, the other by the Normandy format, France, Germany, Ukraine, and Russia. Do you think you can actually deter Russia with diplomacy?
You're right. Putin has strange preoccupation with Olympic Games. He is attacking at Olympic Games. He probably forgot about this why Olympic Games, where actually every war was stopping at that ancient times. What we are trying to achieve in Normandy format is not very well known over the ocean there, but this is the 4 nations which you mentioned trying to resolve the situation in east of Ukraine. And if Russians are trying to put us at the table on their conditions by threatening yet another war on us, this is not something Ukrainians, and we won't budge. And we understand that our partners in Germany and France are trying to persuade Russia that this course will not bring any results.
We've heard from people in Ukraine through our colleagues, who've covered the region, who are covering the region, but also from the leadership in Ukraine saying, essentially, we're used to this. Nothing has changed over the last 8 years. We're used to Russia's aggression. Why do you think he's taking that tact, Mr. Zelensky? Taking that tact, is he just trying to calm people's fears in his country?
Obviously, he's trying to calm people, because one of the ideas which have been discussed with so many partners of ours, that separately what Putin is trying to achieve, he is trying to threaten us to the point when the whole fabric of Ukrainian society will just collapse, and the Ukrainian society, even without his effort, without his soldiers in our land, will just collapse and crumble down. We can't allow it to happen, and there are people who are scared to this. I should be quite seriously considering that. I understand, I appreciate this, but the same, our forces are regaining their possibility, they're regaining their posture, and with the assistance of our friends, if united, we can deter them without even trying to shoot and kill people.
In the efforts to make sure something like that doesn't happen, who do you think, sir, will ultimately have to make concessions in the diplomatic efforts for Mr. Putin and the Kremlin to back down? Is it going to be NATO making the concessions, the US, or the EU?
I saw today the reaction of Russians, Lavrov, namely the Russian foreign minister, that he received a letter from NATO in response for their demands. Their demands were unreasonable in the first place. Nobody's rolling back into 1997. Nobody's getting forces from the NATO nations like Bulgaria and Romania, meaning that he's offering something unrealistic, and he's not expecting everything to receive, but they want to have at least some concessions. The fear of Ukraine that concession will have to come on our expense. That's what we are trying to avoid. That's why we are in serious negotiations with our partners, that we are on our land. We are not pretending, we don't want anything from Russia. We just want them to get away from our land and let us be.
If it's not a physical invasion into Ukraine, what kinds of concerns do you have about other kinds of impact that Russia could have? What are you most worried about right now?
They're doing everything. We just had a major cyber attack. I know that your resources were under cyber attack, but all Ukrainian governmental resources, even my embassy's website, was down. They have all the hybrid things. For example, in some of the cities, these false bomb threats were issued. In some cities, all the schools and hospitals were threatened to be bombed. So diverting our efforts of our security forces to unrealistic and some threat which not even existing. By this, they're creating this atmosphere of uncertainty, and people just scared. We have to bring them back to normality. So somehow we have to calm them down. At the same time, we have to raise the morale of the soldiers and those civilians who want to come and defend the land right now against anybody who would come to our land.
Sir, I thank you once again for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.